Hi, I'm Jack. How's business? Barb, nice to meet you. Glad you're here.
Hello, sir. How are you?
And your name is?
Brian Rendell. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Joe
Freed.
You're general
In the Marines.
in the Marines.
Yeah.
Did you go to Iraq or
a lieutenant general? That's 3 stars.
Oh,
general is
just a
4.
3-star.
Just a 3-star.
So did you ever serve in Iraq or Afghanistan?
I went there, but I was not stationed there. You don't need a bunch of generals running around in places like that. I did my shall we say my combat in places like Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's where I started because
That's where you earned your stars, I guess.
well, that's right. Well, I don't know if I ever earned my
They call it
stars.
stripes, but it's stars now.
I earned my I earned my keep anyway.
All right.
If nothing else, but
With
that's
the reserves, Marine reserves,
well, I was with both because
active reserve,
I was active duty for 7 years, from late 60s to mid 70s. That's when I was in Vietnam. Then I got out, but I stayed in the reserves. And then fast forward 20-some years, my last 6 years in the reserves turned out to be active duty. So over
they pulled in the reserves.
right, so over 40 years, I ended up with about 21 years of active duty over a 40-year
You're an
time.
aviator.
I was. I'm a pilot. I'm a helicopter.
Do you remember North Central?
Of course, my first airline, actually it was my second airline, but was Republic, which was North Central before it became Republic, and then it was Northwest.
The ruptured duck.
The Ruptured Duck, Herman,
That's the lame
Herman, the Blue Goose.
The Blue Goose. That's
Yeah.
right. So you live in Watersmeet?
Watersmeet, yeah.
And you're there all winter?
Well, I don't spend the entire winter there.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I do. Well, let's put it this way: we have 8 grandkids, coast to coast.
So you're out and about.
So we have 4 in San Francisco, 3 in Chicago, 1 in northern New Jersey, and because I was an airline pilot, we're blessed to have some travel benefits.
frequent flyer kind of thing.
Well, kind of things, but the point is we kind of go. We're in high school for the 3rd time. Our oldest grandsons are now freshmen in high school. One is in California and one is in Chicago.
So
We're
out and about a lot.
yeah, we travel. I never unpack my suitcase. That's a whole over from
Are you
there.
going to talk about Social Security today?
You mean how I'm going to get rid of it and cut it and take all your benefits away? Did you guys see that?
I saw that ad, yeah.
Yeah,
Wait, you gonna what?
I'm dependent on it, so I'm worried.
In fact, I'll talk about as much or as little as you want to talk about. I'm going to throw it open to questions. And let's face it, you're doing well when your opponents are just hammering you relentlessly on basically lies, but they have to do something. Otherwise, they don't. We're standing on very strictly on issues. We're not getting in slinging the mud back and forth. That's not what we did. That's not what we did in the primary. That's not what we're going to do now. And so anything.
Where do you see your difference with the other guy on Social Security and the VA and all that kind of stuff?
Well, let's put it this way.
These are pretty sensitive programs.
I'll give you the big picture. I'm a small business owner. I've been in the medical equipment business for 40 years, mainly operating room stuff. So I created businesses, designed products. I've done everything except manufacture those products. So I have the perspective of a small business owner. I have the perspective of a Marine general. Okay? And I have the perspective of an airline pilot. My opponent has none of those perspectives when it comes to the gravity of making serious, tough decisions that affect people's not only life, but then their welfare and all those other things. So just it's a matter of just perspective and experience. I have it, and he does not so much.
If you don't mind, I'm just curious that if you have Social Security, which we're all concerned is going to last, how long it's going to last, right?
So what do you do? Just wait till it runs out?
Well, and I understand that having people use private accounts, or some kind of private accounts, is one of the options out there people are talking about. My concern is that where do the profits come from to pay their commissions? Right now, the government takes a commission, so that's concerning.
Well, but that's a great question because getting in, and I'll probably talk about this in the larger group. Well, there used to be such a thing as a defined benefit. pension. You paid in, you worked for a company for 30 years, and I don't know what, if your number was your number, and that was paid, you knew you were gonna get that.
Yeah, they don't have pensions anymore.
Now you don't have defined benefit. You have now defined contribution, which is the 401k, where you contribute and then you control through whichever, company, Fidelity or Northwest, whatever the company is, you control the investment risk.
If you're retired during the market turn down, right?
Yeah, I mean, bottom line is, but you control your money. Right now, where does your Social Security come from? It starts when that money is deducted from your paycheck. It was going to go into your pocket, but no, you took a part of your paycheck and you sent it to the government as part of your deduction for Social Security. Then 30 or 40 years later, the government gives it back to you. Okay, what kind of a rate of return? Who controls what? And the point is, as we say, right now, they're saying, well, by 2032, unless we do something, there's going to be no money to come back. At one point, there was 300 people paying in for every one they collected. Now it's down to about 3 to 1. So you can, anybody who can add and project out, you can do the math that the pot is running dry. So
Do you think it's fair that people who have a high income get to cap it off when they
I don't think there should be caps.
You mean like if so we could extend when how long they pay?
Yeah, I don't think there should be caps, but at the same time, I'm not a big government fan. Name me one program that the government has managed financially. Just name me one. If you can.
Social Security, so far. In fact,
So far with an end date.
the Congress, what did they do in 2000 with that surplus that was in Social Security? Why did they take it?
We don't have a lot of big fans for Congress.
I'm going there to reduce the size of federal government. Get them out of the businesses.
So who could they not, why don't they put the money back?
Well, first of all, you've been electing the wrong kind of people to go to Congress. That's because you've been electing people who viewed it as another rung on their career ladder. If you elect someone who's going there as a promotion, you got the wrong person.
Well, what do you do with your business if you become elected then? You just let go of your business?
I'll probably, my business is a separate business and I can easily have someone else run it. It's not my, isn't my business, but what it won't be is a conflict of interest. I've had my business for 20 years and I had people run it for me when I was recalled to actually do it.
Yeah.
So the one thing I won't do is violate any ethics laws when it comes to that.
So like a blind trust, they're talking about Trump having a blind trust for his money.
I don't comment on things I don't know.
What do you think of Trump? I don't like him.
I don't like anybody we got for a candidate, but as my mother used to say, look in the mirror if you want to know who's the boy. Because we let...
When he looks in the mirror, he sees a 35-year-old man.
Well,
just say, look in the mirror.
my mother, when I was growing up and something was going wrong, my mother said, if you want to know who's to blame to start, look in the mirror. Because we let the presidential candidates we have today, we have allowed that to happen. So what do?
Well, get more people to get out and vote in
What do
primaries.
you think of the sequester that's hurting our military right now? They cannot plan because they have to constantly do with a contingency
I come out of the
resolution.
military. I have some very defined things. Bottom line is every governmental department has waste.
Okay, but the sequester is
Now,
really
it's a different
hurting
story.
us.
Now, we're not going to get into that right now because this is, we're going to do a little presentation.
Well, last summer they
And it
didn't hold
wouldn't-
the sides of the road because of low government.
The military should be exempted from the sequester because it's a matter of national
Oh,
defense.
yeah, and
But they
it's
should not be exempted from being their feet held to the fire for financial accountability when it comes to how they spend the money.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for
I'm
coming
glad
to
you're
visit.
here. And I can see this is going to be an engaging group.
Well, you got
I'm
a
ready.
good group anyway.
I'm ready. They warmed me up. They already been hitting me with questions here. All right.
Jack, you need a microphone?
I don't need a microphone, but what I will do is when I talk, I'm probably going to stand over here, so I'm going to ask these people to kind of come this way to close up the circle a little bit. Hi. Are you filming this?
Not yet. I will be.
And who are you?
Aaliyah with TD6 News. Lieutenant General Jack. Nice to meet you, sir.
Good to meet you. TV6 is
It is. I'm just one person in this area. Western.
Did I see somebody from 6 2 minutes ago on the server?
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, and I especially want to thank the Chamber as well as Kira and Aquila, our young professionals, for helping us get the word out for this this event this evening. So again, thank you. We're very honored and privileged to have candidate Bergman here with us tonight. But before I introduce him, I want you to think back to either elementary school or early high school. I think we all probably had to do some memorization. And I think about that document that starts, "We the people," right? Everybody remember having to memorize that? That's our Constitution. And really our Constitution affirms that the government exists to serve the citizens of the United States. When you think about it, it's a short document. It's only 4,400 words. It's the shortest constitution of any major government in the world, and it's served us very well. It provides for a number of different things, but one of the things that it provides for is the peaceful transition of power or of office. And depending on your office, you're out talking to folks about representing them every 2 or 4 or 6 years. Okay? And so tonight we have a wonderful opportunity to we the people to voice our opinions and to hear the opinions of somebody who will potentially be representing us. And so I want to introduce Lieutenant General Jack Bergman. Jack is running on the Republican ticket for the 1st Congressional District. So please join me in welcoming Jack.
Thanks. Okay, gang, like anybody here been in the military? Okay, so the point is we're going to do a little school circle, which the military is famous for. So I'm going to stand over here, and if you, from that side of the room, will kind of come down this way, and we'll fill it in over here. So we've got a kind of a half circle in here because of 2 things. Number 1, I can see you, and you can hear me. That's because, you know, as my wife says, communication is what's heard. It's not necessarily what is said. So, as we dialogue here tonight, I am very much looking forward to hearing what's on your mind. And any question that you would ask is fair game. And I will give you 1 of 3 responses. Here's what I know. No baloney. I have no clue, but I will find out for you. Or potentially you could ask me a question that I have awareness of, and that would revolve around national security, because I do, as a retired general officer, I do maintain a security clearance and know of things that may be on your mind, but this room is not cleared, nor are you, for an in-depth answer. So I hope you would respect the fact that you could potentially ask me something that was classified, and I'll have to tell you I cannot respond. I hope you would understand. So,
no Area 51 questions?
Pardon me?
No Area 51 questions, huh?
Well, you know, Area 51, I've got all sorts of jokes about that, but I'm not going to tell you. Because my wife says, my wife's not here tonight, she's doing a sister's family trip in Iowa. She was at a family wedding this weekend, and she's now celebrating her sister's 69th birthday, and so she's not here tonight, but she always gives me guidance, and she says, start with, number 1, you're not funny. So don't try to be funny, don't tell any jokes. So that's my wife's guidance, so that's what I will do. But as Jeff said about the Constitution and how few words it is, one of the reasons it is what it is because our founding fathers, at that time, starting probably in the 1750s or before, studied all of the civilizations in the world previous to the 13 colonies. And they looked at what had worked and what hadn't worked. So when their ideas were coalesced into the Constitution, they came out of a study of history and also a very rigorous debate among people who had very, very, very different views of life and what the next step should be. And I would suggest to you most of that debate took place out of the view of the media. And one of the questions I would like to have, if we could have the founding fathers here in the room with us at any time, I would like to ask them, how would they conduct their business today, given the situation with, again, the reality of the media today? And by the way, don't mistake me, this is not anti-media. This is about how do you conduct your business when you're dealing with a tough subject that may or may not be ready for prime time until you've had that debate. It's a challenge. But our country guarantees freedoms. In fact, if you will spend a second or so here on history, if the Greeks gave us medicine, art, philosophy, and the Romans gave us law, structure, organization, what is our country? What is the United States of America given to the world that we will be remembered for? Individual freedoms, unprecedented in the history of the world. Remember that. Just remember that when you're thinking about what it is that we are about. And we are the first and only country to ever, ever, ever focus on that as to why we exist. I'm Jack Bergman. My family is relatively new to the Upper Peninsula. My grandparents got here in the 1880s. Is that old enough? My grandfather was an iron miner. He and my grandmother came from Sweden via a short stint in Finland, and then came to the Ironwood area. My father and his 5 siblings were born in the company mine clinic in a suburb of Ironwood called Montreal. If any of you know where that is, that's where the company mine clinic was located. But by the mid-1920s, my father and a couple of his buddies, by the way, his parents had passed, so here is a family without parents. And he and a couple of his buddies said, you know, there's really not a whole lot of jobs up here, so we're going to get out of town. And they hitchhiked down to Minneapolis. And he found work, and he met my mom. And that's where I was born, in a little town. I was in Savage, Minnesota, is where I was raised and went to high school, and then left there. Joined the Marines after college. Spent a tour in Vietnam as a helicopter pilot. Came back, flight instructor for a few years in Pensacola, Florida. Decided to seek my fame and fortune in the business world. Left the active duty Marine Corps, but I stayed in the reserves. Got involved in the medical equipment business, most specifically operating room equipment. So if anybody wants to talk, hemostats and needle holders and or surgical microscopes or arteriographs or you name it, we could talk for a long time. We're not going to talk about that tonight. Bottom line is I got more hours in an OR than I do in an airplane. And I've got about 16,000 hours of flying time because when I wasn't in a Marine Corps Reserve uniform or in a set of OR scrubs like Dr. Sears is handsomely modeling here this evening, I was in an airline pilot uniform for Northwest Airlines, and I was based in Detroit for about 22 years. So there's a pretty good chance that if you ever flew through Detroit between, from the mid-'80s through the early 2000s, I could have been your pilot. By the way, I never personally lost your baggage, okay? But I always took responsibility and accountability to getting you on the ground safely. May not have been at the airport of your choice because of bad weather or maintenance issues or whatever, and that happened over an occasion. You had to make adjustments. But the point of me telling you that is that I'm a serious person. And I'm used to being held accountable for all of my decisions. And I'm used to being in a situation where I communicate with people to figure out a better way to get results, positive results. I'm a low to no drama person, and if any of you would like to work under in any of my organizations, there are two phrases you can use that will guarantee you no employment. Number one, this is the way we've always done it. And number two, it's not my job. I would suggest to you, if either of those are your philosophy, you would be best to seek employment elsewhere. If you haven't figured out already, I'm a guy who's probably going to look you straight in the eye, and I'll give you a straight answer. And I think that's what everybody wants, and that's what everybody deserves. And I know that bad news does not get better with time, but it has to be delivered. And I know that those of you who are here in the healthcare business, you make tough decisions on a daily basis. Number one, how do you keep your hospital open? Number two, and most importantly, how do you guarantee positive patient outcomes? Because that is your mission. It's about that patient. When they leave you, they are better than when they came in your door. That's your business. So, having said that, I guess the most important part, anybody want to know why I'm running?
Please.
Yeah, why would a guy 69 years old who's had...
I know.
No, I don't. I don't need a job. I absolutely do not. I had 3 careers. I was enjoying fishing in Watersmeet. But the reality is, as my wife and I contemplated the world that we received from our parents and grandparents who had gone, in some cases, through World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, and the world that was given to us, and now the world with it approaching $20 trillion in debt, with a government that has no clue how to responsibly spend its money, even when it figures out what it wants to do, with an education system that is not producing functional 18-year-olds. How many people here, when you went through the school system, especially in grade school, heard the phrase reading, writing, arithmetic, right? That's what we learned. Well, guess what? We don't teach all of that anymore. We certainly don't teach some of the things we need to teach. I would suggest to you, I'm going to even throw out the arithmetic, because now we all use calculators anyway, which is that's another subject. But I would say it's reading, writing, and comprehension. Because if you are an employer looking to hire someone of any age, if they can't read the company manual, whether it's human resources or it's their job description manual, how do you begin to employ them? If they can't comprehend, because they can't write a sentence or do a basic communication, how are they going to communicate to someone else? They're going to communicate in emoticons, or those whatever those things are, the smiley faces. And if they got more, I had no idea there was something. That must be a cottage industry. We should start. Maybe we can make a little money and reduce the federal deficit if we could patent all the emoticons for the future. But the point is, our education system is broken, and it's broken because you have a Department of Education at the federal level that is absolutely a waste of time and money. It was an experiment in the 70s that didn't work. Get the federal government out of the education business, get rid of Common Core, and bring the responsibility for education back to the states. So you create a strong school system at the state level. Homeschooling is flourishing. Charter schools have been a blessing and an answer to areas where the public school systems are failing. This is not a one-size-fits-all, except the fact, get the federal government out of the education business. When you do something like that, you send a message to those other agencies that are basically draining your resources unnecessarily, so that they either get on the ball and quit over-regulating and reduce. By the way, we don't need to rebuild the federal government. We need to start by reducing the federal government and then reforming what is left when we're done reducing. Lastly, we talked about the Constitution already. We have a framework. Whether you like it or not, or whether you have a candidate that you like in this presidential election or not, this presidential election is all about the Supreme Court. As much as we like to think it's about other things, and it's personality driven or this, that, or the other thing, this election will determine the Supreme Court, which will affect us for the next 50 years easily, but it could change the balance. Do we stay as a constitutionally based country, Or are we at the whim of a group of activists who say, well, let's do it this way today and see how that works. That's not how we were founded. So if you believe that the Founding Fathers got it right, then you really only have one choice for your vote for president in November. Now, you can tell I'm passionate, I think. I am not emotional because no one likes it when their pilot gets emotional. So having said that, I am running for the 1st Congressional District. Dan Benishek is retiring, and I believe that this country needs leadership. It needs seasoned leadership. It needs people with a perspective that is outside of just being a government operative. It's not working. That's why I'm running, because I believe we are a country that needs not only a better way, but we need to make better choices on who we send to represent us. So, and by the way, I'm only running one major campaign like this year. Because when you elect me, I'm not going to come back here 2 years from now and say, oh, you should re-elect me again because this, that, and the other thing. Here's what I'm going to do for you. I'll stand on my record. And then you can decide if you want to re-elect me 2 years from now. And we could talk about how I have some very definitive thoughts on the election cycle in the House of Representatives, because again, getting back to the media piece, it's continuous now. When you're in the House of Representatives, you do nothing but run for re-election. How do you get any business done? So I have some ideas about what we need to do as a country as we move forward in a constitutionally based environment to reform ourselves for the future. So, having said that, I'll open it up the floor for questions. And oh, by the way, if anybody has a question that you don't want to ask, you just don't feel comfortable asking it in the group, I'll be more than happy after it's all over to talk to you one-on-one. So, ladies first.
I absolutely agree with what you say about educational reform. We absolutely need it. And I also agree that our bureaucracy needs reforming. But in order to accomplish some of that, especially in the Upper Peninsula, I feel strongly that our economic development needs vast growth. Do you have some ideas about what we can do up here to improve our economic development opportunities?
I do. Well, number one, from a standpoint of when you think about the natural resources that we have, I'm not a big one on preserving, because preserving means you just preserve it and you don't use it. I like to conserve, which means you utilize your resources in a rational manner to provide the longest term use of that particular resource. Let's talk about mining. When we pull ore out of the ground, why should we put it aboard ore boats and send it to some other country for all the rest of the processing to make it into finished goods? No. We should mine it responsibly. We should have some type of, my term, processing facilities in the Upper Peninsula or somewhere along the shoreline here. And then, when we process it to a point, then it goes somewhere else in the Great Lakes. Chances are pretty good it's going to be somewhere in Michigan, if you will, to in the end become a finished product before it even leaves. Now, if it's a piece of, a copper connector that will be put into some widget, some electronic product that is manufactured somewhere else, that's probably, good enough. But we create jobs long-term with that kind of an attitude. When you have an educated workforce that employers are going to consider basing a business here, as I talked earlier, if a young 18-year-old or 20-year-old can't read an instruction manual for operating a CAD/CAM program or some machinery that's largely now computer-driven, employers aren't going to come here if they don't have a built-in workforce. They might come for, oh wow, it's really nice, but they want two things. Number one, they want an economic environment where the tax rate is such that they know that they can come here, set up shop, make a profit, employ people, and in the end, send their product where it needs to go. So on the economic side. Second thing is that everybody here know the term low-hanging fruit. Okay, you know, it's easy to get at. My number one priority for something that I believe is the right thing to do for a couple of reasons, and it is low-hanging fruit. In fact, it's been low-hanging fruit for almost 30 years, and that's to get the Sioux locks repaired and rebuilt and expanded. Because now, the data's out there. If for whatever reason those locks close, it'll choke off economically, not only this area, but other parts of the country and potentially parts of the world. And also because we're on a border, the Sioux locks are now a national security issue from the standpoint of potentially keeping the Great Lakes open if we needed to do that in the wintertime for whatever reason. So economically and national security wise, getting the money, starting the project on locks, getting it done. Number one, it makes the locks what it needs to be for the future, and it provides jobs here in the district. So that's some of my thoughts on that.
What about railroads?
What about it?
Well, do you think we should bring railroads back, because they used to be here to transport the copper years ago?
Well, it depends on if the copper needs to be transported. If we're processing it here, how do we take it out? I don't know. If we need the railroads, then yes. The question is, what we don't want to do is be sending the copper somewhere else if we don't have to. And in the end, it may not be, and I'm going to make up something here. I'm good at making up things because I think on the fly. No pun intended. If you're a pilot, you have to. I tried to be funny, and my wife says you're not funny. Okay. The point is, you have a runway at K.I. Sawyer, which is one of the longest runways because of why it was built. You could conceivably say that a finished product, rather than be taken out by rail, might be transported over to K.I. Sawyer and sent out via, 747 cargo plane. I don't know. So I'd be giving you an answer to that without benefit of any data on my part. And I
We
don't
used to have passenger railroad from Milwaukee up to here. We don't have that at all anymore. Do you think we could have that back?
Would people ride on it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'm a business guy, and if you can present to me an economic case for doing something that in the end is not a drain, because that money, if I don't believe in government subsidies because it comes out of your pocket. It comes out of your pocket. So I'm a data guy. Show me the business plan, show me the numbers, show me what the benefit is. And there are sometimes we do something that we don't necessarily need to make a profit, but we don't need to be draining other resources just to serve that.
But look at the railroads that China has and
Yeah,
France
again,
has, and ours look like crap.
Yeah, but I haven't, ma'am, I haven't thought about the railroads to that level. I've been, yeah, bottom line is I want airplanes. I couldn't get those trains to go fast enough to get them airplanes. Sir.
So I work at Michigan Tech University. I am a professor of mathematics. So.
Oh, so nice about arithmetic, huh? You didn't like that comment.
Well, I'm seriously wondering. I have to ask about this. So I know many of the people who worked on the writing of the Common Core, at least on the math side of it. It was a coalition of state boards of education, governors, teachers, both at the primary level and people who taught and researched at the university level. It was never really a federal program, so it was adopted by a lot of states, and pretty much the Department of Education said this seems to be a good idea, and all of a sudden people stopped liking it. I'd like you to elaborate on this remark about arithmetic, because you're talking about people who need to be able to make a business case. Hopefully these people know how to calculate compound interest.
Fair enough. Fair enough. When was the first calculator put into play in business?
The anti-theorem, perhaps?
The one we use that we would say, the base today where students actually use in class. When would you say? When was that time? No, not the electronic. We don't have electronic abacus. Or do we? Maybe we do. I don't know. Probably in the mid-'70s to the late '70s.
Texas
It depends on what you call a calculator.
Well, the point is,
Yeah.
but yes, I bought my first calculator when I was in grad school because we were doing some engineering stuff that it had square roots and all different things, processes that now it cut my time. By the way, when I got into third year of calculus in college, I was a math major, and I decided I wasn't going to teach, and I wasn't going to be an engineer. And I said, well, 2 years of counseling is enough. I'm gonna move on. And the point is, fair enough, you live and die by your comments. And bell curve, I knew I wasn't gonna please everybody with that one. But the point is, when you have a young boy or girl who can't make change, I would suggest you, if you want to start reading some childhood development things, read Dr. Leonard Sachs, who talks about some various things when it comes to developmental things in children. And we do need to teach basic mathematics, but we, in the larger picture of the education system, how do I want to say this? I'm more concerned about someone being able to comprehend the equation in verbal terms and to write about it than to actually do the calculation.
That requires a serious practice of number sense, for which these.
Yeah. And point well taken, and I got a hunch I'm going to bring you on the campaign trail with me so I don't screw this up again. Okay?
Okay, I had mentioned earlier about the sequester.
Yeah.
Now, I watched last week on C-SPAN, they had a budget hearing in the Senate, and they had General Milley, and they had
General who?
Milley from the Army,
Oh, okay.
and then they had, was it Richardson from the Air
John Richardson is the
And the
Chief of
Navy.
Naval Operations.
Right, and Goldstein or somebody from the Air Force,
Okay?
and.
You forgot the Marine, Bob
Marine, no, the
Miller.
Marine guy was very, very vocal on.
He's from
And again,
Michigan, you know.
Okay, I was on the edge of my seat watching this, because I have raised 5 sons, and I have had somebody active military since 1982,
Mhm.
and I still do. Okay, so I'm very, very interested in this stuff. And our national security is really important right now, and the sequester has done a number on our military readiness. And there is so much that I have to read now, because it's opened a new door for me. And
Is there a question here?
The question, okay, I should have stopped talking.
Okay.
What is your opinion on the sequester for the military?
Well, number one, the government has a tendency to paint everything with one brush, a one-size-fits-all solutions. The sequester was a one-size-fits-all solutions with no exemptions when it was first enacted. The Department of Defense should be exempt from sequestration, but they should not be exempt from fiscal responsibility.
But leave the domestic cap on?
Say that again?
You want to leave the domestic sequester cap on?
We have to get control of the spending in this country. Tell me if we let bureaucracies overregulate and spend if you say, well, let me ask you a question. Let's say, because this is, if you want to give the defense sector $1, you have to give the social service sector $1.
That was kind of the deal originally.
Is that the right answer going forward? If you got 2 kids, and one was being a really good, and you guaranteed him an ice cream cone because they were good, would you give the other one who had been just a little hellion that day, do they get ice cream because you got 2 kids? Now, I'm not saying it's probably a poor analogy, but no, one size doesn't fit all. Just because you give $1 here, you don't give $1 on the other side. I'm sorry, I don't buy that, because then you don't know where your money is being spent. If you're a business owner, you don't just say, well, this pot of money goes to, R&D gets the same amount as manufacturing, it gets to sales. That's not a business model for success.
When I look around the room, I see most of us here have gray hair. If it's not gray, it's colored.
By the way, managed. And quite nicely, I might add.
Well, so my question is, what I see, I'm a pediatrician, and what I see is a lot of disengagement of young people. I see them expecting democracy to be socialism. Like, I confronted my son about it. I said, he was going on and on and on. I said, you know how much I pay in taxes, right? And I said, to get all of these things, it comes from somewhere. I said, you sound like a socialist, not a Democrat. And I said, it's okay as long as you keep the terms straight in your head. But I don't see engagement of young people. And I think that there is a problem with perception. And I think we have a generation of young people that have not had hardship.
You're not making a case for not teaching math and teaching more civics. I just
No.
wanted to make sure.
But you know, I mean, like in my generation, we had to turn the, you know, the energy crisis happened and we all, you know, like whatever happened to everybody has to sacrifice a little to make everything better.
Can I ask a question?
So.
Because a great statement, and because we are a country that was founded, again, by people disagreeing, but agreeing on a common mission, a higher good that we were trying to accomplish. I get asked a lot about, what about women in combat? Bottom line is, to me, it makes no difference, because, for example, we've had women in combat for all of our wars, just so you know. I believe the greater question this country has to ask itself, based upon your comment, is that at the age of 18, should there be a requirement for everyone, both male and female, to register for the draft? And if that's the case, should there, as an extension of that national dialogue, should there be a requirement at the age of 18 for some type of national service? I don't care if it's the Peace Corps, the Marine Corps, the Forest Service, the Health Service, whatever it happens to be, should we as a country, to help our 18-year-olds understand the difference between democracy and socialism and communism and free market and whatever it happens to be, if we're going to prepare them to be functioning adults. You know, someone asked me a long time ago, how will you know if you've been a good parent? And I went, wow. And I thought of it, here's what I came up with. Number one, that when that young boy or girl leaves the fold, they know three things. Number one, the difference between right and wrong. Number two, the punishment that was meted out to them by their parents was done out of love and not out of hate. And number three, where a dollar really comes from. So when you think about that, those are three simple statements, but require a lot of effort on parents to prepare their youngsters that they brought into this world for that next first step. I knew growing up that if I was in trouble at school, I was in more trouble at home, because my parents talked to my teachers, my coaches, the pastor. Growing up in a town of 300 people, everybody knew what was going on, and nobody locked their doors, and you know, there was kind of like a Minnesota version of Mayberry or whatever. That was just, you know, what it was. But the reality is, kids need love and discipline and structure to help guide them through those very hormonal stages of life at certain ages. My youngest daughter is a career elementary teacher. She started her teaching career 20-some years ago in middle school language arts. And I went down to see her one day. She was teaching in north of Cincinnati. And I said, well, how's it going, Molly? She said, Dad, when those kids, those doors open up in the morning and those kids pour in, you can smell the hormones. Because here you're talking 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Now she's, by the way, now she's the mother of a high school freshman, you know, a 7th grader and a 5th grader. And my wife and I we were telling somebody earlier, we just entered high school for the 3rd time, because our oldest grandson's 14-year-old is a freshman in high school in Northern California, and the other one is a freshman in high school in the suburbs of Chicago. I'm very passionate about education, and education comes from several areas: family, faith, and the education system. Those three. Sir?
How do you get the family back?
I don't have an answer to that.
I have one.
Good
Do
question.
things with the family. What is a family but people who do things together? That's my best advice from a close family member.
That's a huge question. I mean,
I
but that's a question that needs to be asked. What are we doing to create the family, or recreate?
Recreate it. That's the,
Yeah, the Constitution clearly states that when we lose a Supreme Court judge, the president is supposed to select one, and Congress is supposed to consider him. Are you just selective in what you do with the Constitution, or do you agree that we should have just really criticized Obama for doing his duty? And
I haven't given that one much thought, quite honestly, since all that was going on and Scalia died. I've been on the campaign trail the entire time. Again, it would be a question that I would answer you without, I had not given it in-depth thought.
okay,
I'll be honest with you, I mean, I choose not to answer questions that I haven't thought about.
yeah.
But if you'd like me to get back to you at a future time, I will be more than happy to.
No, that's okay. I just wondered if you
agreed
yeah. with the people who were
I'm a dad.
criticizing
Yeah.
Obama
Yeah,
for doing his
again,
duty.
I didn't put that on my plate I could, as a Marine general, I could drive my staffs crazy because I'm a data guy. And they would come in with a great idea, and they had discussed it among themselves, and then I would start asking questions below that level. And that's kind of how I work. That's how I do work. So the point is, I would not offer a comment on it tonight.
So, I grew up in a family with a three-legged stool.
Okay.
Some of it was reading, writing, arithmetic. But it was honesty, personal responsibility, and caring about others. So when I'm looking for a candidate, you hit the first two. I'm a responsible guy, takes personal accountability for my actions. I'm honest. The caring about others, I'm looking for somebody who's going to defend and protect the people of the Upper Peninsula. And so this is a general question. You can answer whatever way you want, but I mean, I'm here to protect my friends and neighbors. I'm here to advocate for them, to give them a hand up or support if they need it. What are you going to do in your tenure as our congressman to defend and protect the people?
Well, first of all, I swore an oath, of course, the oath that you swear when you join the military is that I will support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Okay, so I am. One of the reasons that the military, and I'm going to say specifically the Marine Corps, because that's who I am and that's what I am. Marines are successful because they don't fight for themselves. They fight for the Marine on their left and the Marine on their right. That's why we are successful, and we don't quit. Okay, so when it comes to protecting and defending, or supporting and protecting, I am interviewing for a job with you. By the way, a job that I don't need, okay? But the reason I decided to stand up, we talked about what world we're passing on to the next generations. But as a Marine, I served 40 years protecting and supporting the Constitution and therefore the people that I was involved with. I'm interviewing for the job of United States Representative for the 1st District of Michigan. You write my paycheck and you set my priorities. We will agree based upon our dialogue together here in a grander scheme of the 1st District. What are the priorities that I should be working on in Washington, D.C. for you? We will agree, or maybe in some cases disagree, but nonetheless, we will set priorities that I can go and say to you, okay, we agree that by and large, number one priority that we had, as I stated, was get the money for the Sulaks, get that project going and get it taken care of. We'll have a set of priorities. It's my job to figure out the how to get it done on the ground, boots on the ground in Washington, D.C. That's my job. I will report to you, probably in some cases in more excruciating detail than you would like, about the progress or the lack of progress or where it's going or what I know now that we didn't know before, and ask your guidance about, okay, what do I do? Absent your input, I will make a decision, because as a pilot and as a Marine, I know that if you are indecisive, you will lose. We have too much at stake in this country. We have too much at stake in the region we are in our district. We are so blessed to have what we have up here when it comes to the natural beauty, when it comes to the attitude of the people who live here. We're here. Is anybody here under duress that you have to be here? You can't leave because you're in the witness protection program or something? I mean, you're here because you want to be here. This is a choice that you have made. We love it here. I am here. I was not born here. My father was. But I chose 35 years ago to build my home when I could finally, break the surly bonds of the working world, if you will, and spend my time full-time here. Truth in that, we'll go ahead. Anyway.
Can I ask a quick follow-up to that question? It should be short. Is that okay? So about supporting and protecting people, he's spoken favorably in past appearances of privatizing things like Social Security, Medicare, voucherizing it, and
that's your word, not mine.
Well, he specifically
I know. I said it because I answered the question. They said, "Would you privatize?"
Okay.
And I could have used a better choice of words because that inflames people. Do you know, early on when I was out collecting signatures, I was dialoguing with a group like this, and I used the word sustainable. And boy, there was several sets of hair fire going on in the crowd. And what I realized afterwards, what I meant was renewable. Forests are renewable. You manage your forest. So go ahead, go back to your question. I just wanted to get that on the record.
Okay, so you would specifically say that you're not in favor of
I'm in
at least
favor.
a possibility?
I'm in favor.
Would it be on the table?
Nate, what would be on the table, and it's going to be on the table in government reform, is the fact that we have to have a system where if you're a taxpayer and you pay in and expect 30 years later to have a return on that, we have to guarantee you a return. How do you do that? That's the question on the table. So to stand here tonight and talk about it's not binary, it's not yes or no, right or wrong, black or white today. We have serious issues on the table that cut way across party lines. This has got nothing to do with Democrats or Republicans. It's got to do with us in the United States of America.
Well, I mean...
And you said it was going to be short.
I'll call the end of the question there.
Okay. Well, I'll dialogue with you afterwards.
I just got one thing. You had mentioned that you kind of believe for the education, faith, family, and education. And
the three legs of my stool is faith, family, and freedoms.
Okay.
That's what we're at the basis. Do you fill in the third piece?
I'm the administrator of the Christian school here,
Okay.
and that's our three-legged model. And so first of all, I'm just thankful that that's where your heart's at. And I want to encourage you with that that's somebody who I'm personally looking for. But just as the administrator, what kind of advice would you give for me in our school?
I'm not sure how to answer that. What kind of advice? From United... I'll tell you what, I will talk to you later about that because I am also a former school board member of a charter school. So this is not, what I'm telling you about the education is not just something I read. Okay, Jeff?
General, just to follow up on Don's question. I have four wonderful children. Last weekend I was in St. Cloud, Minnesota, with my daughter for Parents Weekend. She's a student at St. Cloud State. And at about 8:07, I got up from sitting outside of Macy's and went outside and got in my car and picked up my wife and my children. So we are about 7 to 13 minutes ahead of the incident that happened there.
Yeah.
But prior to that, my older daughter, who is second year at Minnesota State Mankato, was very excited and gave my wife and I a folder from the U.S. Navy Reserve Recruiter.
Okay.
And she was looking at joining the U.S. Navy Reserve. And so my question to you is, what role do you think that the United States should play, and if you could comment on the role of the reserve, since it hits home personally for me, in terrorism, ISIS, keeping the world safe, and how do we pay for all of that as well? So how far should we go, and how do we pay for it?
Well, number one, the percentage of the population today that is serving or has served in the United States military in any form, whether it be active reserve or National Guard, is less than 10% of the population in this country. So that's a data point for you. When you look at the defense dollars that are spent on the military in total, you only pay a guardsman or a reservist when they're performing duty. So when you talk about an investment, when you need it, your guard and reserve is a great investment for two reasons at least. Number one, you have a ready capability when you need it and have to call it up. Number two, because you only have 10% of the entire population who has any connection with the military, you now have a link between your employers and the military, because that guardsman or reservist may work in your hospital here, may be a student at Tech, may be working at the print shop downtown or the restaurant. So now you have a link to the community with the military through that person you've employed. And oh, by the way, when you employ a member of the Guard and Reserve, guess what they're required to do? They're required to show up on time for their Guard and Reserve duty. They can pass a drug test. All the things that employers kind of like. They're responsible, okay? So I'm a huge fan of the Guard and Reserve. And there is a separate talk. I'll call it my Chamber of Commerce talk that I've given for years after retiring from the Marine Corps. Because I say Chamber of Commerce or the Rotary or Kiwanis, because you have employers there. And everybody makes a sacrifice when you have a member of the Guard and Reserve. That, as a member of the Guard and Reserve, you have at least two people mad at you on any given day. Because you can only be one place at one time. So your spouse is mad at you because you're not home and you missed the kids' basketball game on Saturday afternoon because you're at guard duty. Okay, your civilian employer is mad at you because you had to take a couple of days off to do some kind of extended guard weekend that happened once or twice a year. Your guard supervisor is mad at you because you can't spend more time with the guard because you've got a family and a civilian job. So my advice to anybody in the Guard and Reserve, let's face it, you have to decide who you want to be unhappy in any given day. And then go for it. But I'm a big proponent of the Guard and Reserve. Now there was, over here, yes.
In all your career, you have almost always been a person who can decide for yourself, or maybe with your co-pilot in the cockpit and so forth. It doesn't sound like you've ever had an experience of having 434 essentially peers that you have to work with and get things through. How do you think you're going to handle that, Jim?
On the surface, that would appear to be true. And I've never been in a situation where I've had to have 434 peers. But I have been in a position that, let's say at the 3-star level in the Marine Corps, where I had, in my case, 12 counterparts, of which I was the only reservist. Everybody else was active duty. So when you think about that when it comes to trying to get a decision made. So, and in the context of business, as I was part of a startup group back in the early 80s that the manufacturing of the products was done in Switzerland. So we had Swiss people involved because the United States did not have the manufacturing technical capability for optics. That all the Colonel's 11 secret herbs and spices were all held in Switzerland because they'd been doing it for centuries. But we also had partners in Japan. So when you get at least 3 different cultures in a room, and largely that room was probably somewhere in northern New Jersey where the U.S. headquarters was, but the ability to get people who not only did not speak the same language, but had different values and different perspectives on the business, it's not without its challenges. I have a plan to how that I will work in Washington, D.C. amongst the other 434, based on my business and military perspectives of mission first, and then how do you get the people that are not necessarily like-minded, but yet agree on the mission, and then how do you get them to work together and come across party lines. I feel very confident that I will be able to function right away when I get to Washington, D.C. at that level. Unlike some of the congressmen who've never had that level of experience, they're going to spend their first year figuring out where their office is. Just because it's a big place and it's complex. I've already lived and worked there from 2003 to 2009 when I got recalled the last time. So, I mean, I know what I'm getting into, and it's not pretty.
So you don't have an issue going across party lines, and you feel that you'll, whatever's best for the country, the state
Geez,
of
if
Michigan.
if there's a Marine, if I'd be willing to work with the Army, I mean, holy cow. No, the short answer, no, because truly, the beauty of our military is we have the different services with the different cultures that then appeal to the different young men and women who choose to join. Not everybody wants to be a Marine or in the Air Force or the Army or the Navy or the Coast Guard. We are a country of choice. And I look for people that are committed to achieving something greater than us. And I really, and my wife would, if she was here, she'd just be shaking her head and say, oh, does he? I look for people who see life differently than I do, because I want to find out why. Yes, sir.
I don't know if I could ever bring myself to vote for Snowbird. How many of those 35 years in Watersmeet have you actually stuck for the winter?
Well, first of all, now, you want me to get right close to you so you can get this on camera real close? Sure. 1980, I slid in the snow for the first time. I'm not going to give you the address because I don't want a whole lot of business.
Of course.
I watched the property for 8 years. The guy who was selling it wanted a really extremely high price, and I couldn't afford it. But he got a little older and got a little serious about selling that property. So I bought it in 1988. I designed a house. That house was finished late 1994. I was flying for Northwest Airlines based in Detroit, commuting. Being in the Marine Corps Reserve, based in places like Kansas City, New York, Southern California. I lived out of a suitcase. I finally got a chance to get up there in 1998. And that's when I became a voting resident in a homestead.
So you stay up here for the winter then?
I got 4 snowmobiles. I snowmobile all winter long, and I also fish in the bayous of Louisiana in January.
Lucky you.
What can I say? It's a long, Mississippi River is a long place. So if anybody wants to paint me as a Louisiana resident, you know, I'm very happy that, you know, that you want to do that, but just facts rule. As we've talked about earlier, I'm a data guy. Tell me the truth, give me the data, and I'll give you an honest response. So any other questions along that line? Are you, I mean, is there criteria that you have that you feel would feel better if I gave you an answer in a different format?
No, I've suffered through all winters every year of my life, and just want to know if you.
You know what the worst thing about the winter is up here, or no matter where you are, is does anybody here disagree with the fact that extended hours of darkness lead to a greater incidence of potential depression and increased alcoholism and other things? It's not the weather that I believe drives people to seek sun. It's the need for increased vitamin D to uplift your attitude, to uplift your perspective in life. That's scientific. So, or a sunlight, but not a tanning salon.
Can't afford to go to the south, so we'll buy a sunlight.
Are you for repealing the Affordable Care Act or changing it and improving it?
You hear every Congress say we're going to repeal Obamacare, but then they all fund it. And the classic line, of course, when it was originally passed, was Nancy Pelosi saying, "Well, we had to pass it so we could read it." I mean, that's got kind of the cart in front of the horse. Is Obamacare 100% broken? No. Is it 80% plus broken? Probably. Any health care plan that forces employers to push their employees to alternative insurers because they can't afford the premiums, and that's a bad plan. Anything that increases costs while decreasing the availability of care is a bad plan. Was it put into place because it was part of the president's legacy? That's not a good enough idea to keep. So I believe we have to take it apart if you want to use the word repeal it, but we still have to have health care in our country that is quality, it's accessible and affordable, and the people who provide it can afford to provide it, and the people who receive it can get it in such a way that it improves their life.
But if we got the votes and we repealed it, then what do you do with the people who are insured under it and then they were uninsured before? So that's what I'm asking. How do we do an interim thing?
That would, again, to try to discuss that here tonight, I have not put the data together. By the way, one of the ways to help me get that answer, okay, is you have to elect me to Congress. Because if you don't elect me, I'm not part of the solution. Okay, and this is just an exercise in, verbal jousting. Okay, but I will find a way to work with people to get that answer. And I did say, right, that I'm only running one campaign. You will decide if you want me to continue to serve after you elect.
Politicians speak broadly of cutting back on the bureaucrats, eliminating them, cut the government back. What do you do with all these unemployed bureaucrats? Where do you put them?
Geez, is that a bad thing? Well, you know, of course, anybody here not know who the character was, Jabba the Hutt, in Star Wars? You know, that character was created as a metaphor for the bureaucracy. You feed it, it gets bigger, it gets sloppier, it gets mad at you, requires more. That's what.
That makes sense.
I'm not really concerned about unemployed bureaucrats because that came out of my taxpayers. I'm funding part of their salary. And as a business owner, the hardest thing I've ever had to do in business is to let someone go. Because I feel if you have to let someone go, that you as their supervisor or boss have failed in mentoring them. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes that has to occur. And I will tell you, as a big reader of leadership and business and management practice in building companies, everybody can be successful somewhere. It just may not be where they are today. So the sooner you, remember I said earlier, bad news doesn't get better with time? The sooner you look someone straight in the eye and say, you're a good person, and you're doing an okay job here, but okay is not good enough. You know, I wish you the very best, and I know you're going to be successful. That person knows. That person knows, quite honestly, that they're hanging on by their fingernails. They know that they need to get moving. It's tough. It's really tough to do that. Anybody who says they like to fire people, and I know I run us, there might be one person out there who has said that recently. Bottom line is, I don't like. I think that's very hard to do.
I'm interested in hearing your response to the second half of Jeff's question, which had
What was the second half?
It was terrorism.
Oh,
so,
okay.
And
what would I do about terrorism?
And I'm interested in knowing about any ideas you have about people that are homegrown, because the people that did what they did were people born in the United States.
Lone wolf.
So,
well, let's start, because this is a very complex question, but I will give you some thoughts on it. Number one, anybody here want to venture a guess? And some of you maybe heard this asked question before, so you know the answer. So don't blurt it out right away if you do. What's the single biggest weapon our adversaries use against us today?
computers.
Close. Close. But the extension of that, the internet. The internet. They use it to recruit. They use it to plan their operations. They use it to execute their operations and then start the cycle again. So here we have the internet, which we love when we can get it up in this part of the world. Okay, we love it. It's a big plus. But the point is, our adversaries use it for their own negative purposes. We are at war in this world every day in the cyber world. Make no mistake about it. We are at war. So, what do we do when you have a free society in which everybody can get on the internet and read all sorts of different websites and then begin to come up with their own conclusions about where their ideals lie and what they're going to do to, do next? It is complex, but it goes back to the basics. You remember a couple of years ago in Minnesota, where a lady was standing in her house doing her dishes, looking out the window was over the sink, and she saw a neighbor kid going into, it wasn't right. It just wasn't right. She called the police. Turns out, when they went into the garage, he had all the makings of pipe bombs and all the different things. There's a phrase out there, if you see something, say something. We've all heard that here in the last few years. I would suggest to you that the example of what it really needs to be, and it was personified a year or so ago on that train in France, where the two young servicemen and their buddy sensed something bad was about to happen. I would say we need to upgrade that saying to, if you sense something, do something. So it goes back to the family. It goes back to the vigilance of the small community. We have to be aware of our surroundings. We can't just be walking around looking at our cell phones. There is personal responsibility to connect on all parts, because I guarantee you, you know, in your neighborhoods, you know when something is different. Don't say, well, it's somebody else's responsibility. Now, taking it to the higher level, we have to know who's in our country. It can't be a revolving door or open borders. That doesn't work, because there are perfectly honest, hardworking, good, qualified people who want to come to our country from countries all over the world. A good immigration policy going forward has three elements. Number one, we as a country decide how many people we want to come into our country on an annual basis. Number two, we agree on a set of criteria for selection. What skill sets do we need? What will benefit us as a country? And number three, agree on a set of enforcement policies to ensure that number one and number two happen. There are people, because of the lax enforcement in our borders and in enforcement of our already existing immigration policies, we have been targeted as a country by groups who want to infiltrate through our system. We have to know.
What about compassion for people that are being persecuted? You know, maybe they don't have skills that we need, but maybe we could open our arms and take people in compassionately.
We have to be compassionate, but how do we decide? That's the key. That's why you elect people to Congress who are going to have those tough discussions, and then come to some level of decision making, and then again, in your case, as constituents of the 1st District, you're going to probably get more information than you would like about what's going on, and I'm going to be asking for input, because I want to make sure that it's just not my perception that I miss something. There is no one size fits all. There's no 100% fix, because let's face it. Let's say you pick your computer company, and you make a new computer with a security system today that is the be-all, end-all. You realize, of course, before that product even hits the market, there are people out there trying to figure out a way around that system. That's the way it works. That's the way it works. That's the interesting and unfortunate dynamic of human behavior that we would call on the negative side of the bell curve. Yes?
Oh, I was going to say, how would you balance the fact that the crackdown on undocumented workers or migrant workers has actually adversely impacted the state of Michigan's products, like our apples, our cherries?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
What happened is, because there's been a crackdown of illegal immigrants, some of them are farmers who are totally dependent on them coming in and farming the thing. They can't get our lazy children to do it, not at the price and the conditions that these workers will do it.
Sure.
How are we going to handle that? Because as it is, it's caused quite a decrease in our produce.
Yeah, one of the things that is, in fact, we have a lot of growers, below the bridge that had several discussions with them on that subject. And for example, let's say that you're picking apples and you've got 10 people working for you. The way the program is set up, they can't go across the street and work for you because they come in, they have to go out of the country. That makes no sense. We have so many rules and regulations that make absolutely no sense when it comes to the end user, because you want them. Why shouldn't we be able to literally, using E-Verify, using whatever we're gonna put forth here in the future, allow them, everybody agrees it's a good solution, except the people who want to regulate it, and they get in the way. You've got them, you pay them, they go across the street, you've got them, you pay them, and when they're done, you know, they head south for the winter. Anyway, but we have a government that over-regulates so many of the things we do. Is there a need for a certain level of regulation? Yes, but if the need is Jabba the Huttish and created, you know, within the bureaucracy, because it says, oh, let's see, if we create 2 new regulations this year, that means we'll get X number of FTEs, full-time equivalents, 2 more jobs, or we'll get X number of money in our budget line. That's the wrong answer. I'm a big one on what makes sense.
So where would that be in your priority list?
Where do you want it?
I think it should be up there.
Okay. Well, then we'll put it
Where they are.
up
Yeah.
there. Well, it is, because, well, you know why? Because it's economic.
Yeah.
You know, there's security. There's a term we use in the military when it comes, the Navy and the Marine Corps literally are afloat and they move all over the world, but we provide forward force projection for security in some very unique places in the world. We do that because business follows the flag being the military. And if the flag is close, companies know that they can send their workers to different places in the world and their workers will be safe and they can do their business and whatever it happens to be. So if we're going to do business globally, and we're going to, we have to make sure that businesses feel that they can do their business internationally or even locally, but in a secure manner and an efficient manner so that a profit can be made, so that they can pay a reasonable market tax rate, return money to the economy, make things, employ people. It's pretty simple do loop if you let it happen. Sir?
We have a university, Michigan Tech, that educates a lot of international students. These are all legal people, and they are highly skilled. They're probably the cream of the crop from their home countries. How do you feel about what we should do as a nation with these highly skilled people? Should we encourage them to go back home?
I would do everything I could to invite them to stay. Enable them to stay too. Quite honestly, we're building our own country.
The word profiling has become a bad word, an irritating word. But everyone does it automatically. Can you come up with another word for profiling that means the same thing? The Israelis use profiling all the time by just walking through the terminals.
Well, I'm not going to use privatize because that's a bad word as well. You know, that's a trigger one. I'm not going to use some of the others. You can call something different things. People, did you ever play a game, Dictionary?
Yeah.
Okay, where you it's like Pictionary without charades without. We play that all the time. We play it with our grandkids because words count. And in this day and age, getting back to the education system, the beauty of understanding the language, being able to speak, being able to articulate your position, to communicate it and use words, is an art. It's not a science. But sometimes it has to be face-to-face, and you can see a person's reaction when you use a word and they start to recoil. And my tendency is to say, okay, I can see that word had an interesting effect. Let's talk about that for a minute. I don't have another word for profiling, but we have to know who's who. And there's predictive models that says if a person has these characteristics, that their chance of possibly being a bad actor is higher than average. We have to be honest. We have to be honest, and being honest doesn't mean being nice to everybody. Remember, respect is earned. Anything that is given to you in life, unless it's given to you with some type of value-based system that you inherently understand, you will not value that unless you feel as though you have earned it. And that's one of the things as we take our youngsters and help them develop into functional, productive, positive attitude, hardworking adults, that sense of a job well done. Do you realize how important it is to dust spark plugs on a shelf? It's not important. But when I was 6, my dad had me dusting the spark plugs. Automotive Electric Supply Company, 1011 Harmon Place, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Because on Saturdays, my mother wanted to get me out of the house. And my dad, the shop was open from 8 until noon on Saturdays. And I was told and taught that, the little spark plugs come in the little plastic, the little wooden, the cardboard cases with a little cellophane so you can see what kind of plug it is. By golly, I dusted those things individually. He gave me a thumbs up, and I think I got a quarter, and maybe an ice cream if I was good. And but that sense of good feeling and what that builds in you confident of a job well done, that goes a long way to having people when they get older say, that's no big deal. I can do that. I'm better than that. Look what I've already done. And even in my case, even if it was only that I just dusted the spark plugs. But I felt good about it. You should have seen me cut a lawn. I got my manual trimmer out and made sure that those edges of the grass.
Sounds like the Marine Corps way.
Well, it was, I tell you what, according to where I grew up, the Marines were pretty easy. My mother taught me how to garden, and she believed that, again, in her philosophy, if you want to reap the benefits, if you want to reap the harvest, you've got to put on all the work on the front end and understand how it all works before you start reaping the harvest. Just don't show up in August to pick the tomatoes or the cucumbers or the onions or whatever it is. And I am so blessed because I had that upbringing. And you know what?
The story of the Little Red Hen. favorite book with my grandkids.
There is, and there are so many of those great kids books that teach that it's not the big wins, it's the little wins, the consistency of effort and the affirmation of that effort that really builds people of character, builds people who have grit and are willing to persevere and go through life's normal ups and downs, and it's not a big deal because they've had success before, even if it was only dusting the spark plugs or weeding the garden. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question on that word privatization. Okay, are you for Medicare turning into vouchers? Are you, like what?
Yeah, I haven't. I tell you what. Again, that's one of those things. You have concentrated on all the issues that I have not here in the last 6 months. I'm not very deep on that one. So they're going back to end game, quality health care that's accessible and affordable. How we get there, we're going to figure out after you send me to Congress. Okay? I can't give you all the answers on the front end because then you may say, well, geez, why didn't we vote for you before? Well, I didn't run. This is your chance. This is your chance. And you can't vote for the incumbent because he's retired. You're going to have to roll the dice with me.
Well, are you going to learn all about these issues and vote for us, or are you going to go by what the party tells you to do?
You ever try to leverage a Marine, especially a general? I'm working for you. I'm not working for the party. Will I work with the party? I'm going to work with both parties. I'll work with everybody who's there. As long as the people who come into that room agree that we have a common purpose that's higher than both of us. It's not about a Democrat, it's not about a Republican, it's not about an independent, it's about the United States of America. And how do we're elected to do all of that hard work to make sure that the results that we come up with best reflect the values of our country based on the Constitution and our ability to move forward and remain a leader in the free world. Pretty simple, but pretty complex.
There's people in your party that, the Republican Party, that go and watch the Republicans that are elected and put into office. And they keep a close eye on them, because if they don't vote the way they want, they primary them. And I was just wondering, who is behind you? You know, who's...
My wife?
Yeah, and I was just wondering, do you have a Tea Party component behind you, or a regular Republican? I don't know who the Republican Party is anymore.
I had nobody behind me. I went from 0% name recognition in the middle of May to winning a primary by 7 points 2.5 months later. Somebody came out of the woodwork.
You are a Republican.
I am a Republican. I am a conservative.
You're not Tea Party.
I'm a conservative. I've never been part of any party. I am running as a Republican. The Tea Party doesn't have anybody on the ballot.
Are you a Uber? That's what we want to know.
Oh, great question. About probably 3 or 4 days before the primary. I know you may find this hard to believe, but there's some shenanigans that go on. And especially, you know, it is what it is. So I started getting emails from this, well, she identified herself as a woman who lived somewhere in Harbor Springs area. And she started questioning me on some things, so I called her up. I said, well, I'm driving, I'm not gonna be texting, so she had her phone number, so I just called her up. Well, she only talked a couple seconds and then she had to go, which is usually a sign that maybe she's not who she says she is, okay? So fast forward, finally the day before the election, I get this, "You're not a Youper." Goes on, and I responded back, "You are correct, ma'am. I'm not a Youper. I am a Youper, Y-O-O-P-E-R, not Y-O-U-P-E-R.
Hey, that was pretty good.
Jack, I want to make sure that you're aware of the time and provide you enough time to speak individually with people. So
Yeah,
maybe
I
one
mean,
more question.
and I'll be more than happy to take any questions individually. And by the way, so you're with 6,
Correct.
and you, sir, are with
The internet.
the internet. Now you know. Remember I was talking about the internet? Right here. There you go. The internet, is that specific internet?
What's that?
Specific internet, or I mean, just internet? or-
Blogging.
Blogging.
Forum.
What's your name?
Matt.
Matt.
Sanford.
Where you live?
I live in Houghton.
Excellent. Born and raised here?
Yep. Graduated from Hancock.
Great.
Right, like a couple yards that way.
What do you do now? Just the internet?
Programmer.
Okay. Go south of the winter?
No. Maybe if I had a house down there, I would. But
You know what? Ours is available for rental if you like. As long as you're in Washington, D.C. All right.
I want to thank you for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to use my sense of humor, however poor it is. But